Okay, so now you figured out how to generate the equation, which is what's listed right here. You're going to want to use some probably fewer number of significant digits. So you can start manipulating that, but rather than writing this down and then punching numbers back in and trying to figure out what to use, you've got some really cool functions in your calculator to allow you to answer questions like, remember this is temperature versus time. So I could say, tell me what this maximum number is. You know, I don't want to try to read it off my graph. I can start messing around and doing trace and, you know, using my arrow key to move up and move around and read out the numbers, but it's going to be approximate. My calculator is a lot smarter than that. So let's figure out what the maximum is. And the best way to do that is to use the calculate. You can see it right here. Use that function. So we're going to come into calculate, and you have a whole bunch of options here. We're going to talk about value in a moment. But what I asked you about the maximum, so in this case it is a maximum, so I can scroll down or just type in the number 4, and my maximum comes out. And you can see here that it's, what, 75.9, something like that. Actually, I'm not sure that that's, here's my maximum. I have to press enter a few times, and here's my maximum coming up. I think I might have some issues here. Let's try that again. So, excuse me. Calculate, and I'm using calculation here. I'm going to get rid of the trace. I think that's what's causing me the problems. Okay, so let's quit out of that. Let's graph it again with no trace on. Use second, calculate. Let's do the maximum, 4. Okay, left bound, fine. So that tells me which side of the curve am I on. So the maximum here has got to be to the left of this point here, and you can see it's flashing left, so I press enter, and then it's going to talk about the right bound, and you can see that the left bound here was just marked. So now I do have to scroll, and I have to get over far enough to the other side of where the maximum is, and it's starting to curve down, so this should be far enough. And now I'm binding it on the right side. So it's saying where's the left side of this and where's the right side. So in between these 2 points it's going to figure out what the maximum is. So now that I have that, I should come up with the right number, which is more like 79.4. And you might say, well, gee, I had a temperature of 81, which is what this little square here is. Yes, that is the actual maximum for that day, but your model comes up with a different maximum, and the model is what you're using for these calculations. So that's what the 79 is. So again, with the maximum, you have to make sure that you tell it, okay, this is the left side of it, this is the right side, press it, and it comes up with your number. So that's the way that you use your calculator, and it's using this equation that's right here to figure all that out. And off the graph. So now that I have the maximum, I could still come back, and let's use the graph again, and I could say, okay, so tell me, or you tell me, what was the temperature at 1 p.m.? Because my data only gave me temperatures at 12 and at 2. So what would the model predict to be the temperature at 1 p.m.? Well, again, I'm going to use that same calculate screen, but now I'm going to use value. So value says, what is the y value if you give me an x value? Press enter, and it pops up and says, what do you want x to be? You tell me, and I'll give you a y. So I'm going to say x is 1 o'clock, but remember I have to use military time, so I'm going to use 13. And when I press enter, it not only tells me the point, but also shows me on the curve where it is. So it says, this model predicts that the temperature at 1 p.m. was 76 degrees. So use the value function on here to find a y value or an output value given an input value. You may also be asked, for the same graph, at what time was the temperature 77 degrees. Remember, my maximum is like 79, almost 80. So at what time was it 70 degrees? Well, I could scroll down here and try to find it, etc., but that's not going to do me very much good. It's going to be hard to find. Your calculator can do it again through another function, and that is it can use the intersect. But the thing is, you have to have a second line or curve to see that intersect. But I told you that the y value is 77 degrees. So I can create another line, and I'm going to do it in y2, a horizontal line this time, that is 77. So when I graph that, now it shows me this point here and this point here is where the temperature was 77 degrees. So if I can find these intersection points, I can find the x value, which is the time that those two events occurred. Again, back to this screen. You can see here our option number 5 is intersect. And it's going to pop up. You can't really predict where the cursor is going to be, but in this case it's very close to the intersection line that we want. So I'm just going to press enter until I get past all the question marks, and it will actually give me what the value is. 77 degrees, which is what we expected, but the time is 13.4. So 13.4 is like 1 o'clock, maybe not quite 1:30, because 0.5 would be 1:30. So that's great. I figured out what this point is. That's the first time that the temperature hit 77 degrees. The second time is going to come from doing an intersect. But before I press all this, you can see I have my first curve. I'm going to cursor over and just scroll over to the other intersection point. And when I do that, that'll ensure that I'm picking up the correct second time. So now that I'm over there, and I don't have to be right on top of it, I just need to be close to it, I'm going to press enter again those several times. And here you see again 77 degrees, which is my output, but now it's at 17.9. So 17.9 is about 18. That's 1800 hours if you're military time, so that would be 6 p.m. So now by finding, again to recap, if you are being asked, what is the x value? What's the value of x given a y? You have to use this intersect function after you create this horizontal line for what your y value is. And note, depending on where that line is, you may have 2 points of intersection for your data set, so you have to look at both of them. One last thing, I'm going to quit out of this, clear the screen. If I were to graph it again, actually I'm going to graph one more time, I can also find those points, but it is less exact and not recommended by, as we said, tracing through it using the trace function here, or you can also go into the table of values. So this is now what is coming out of the Y1 calculation. And depending on how you set up your table of values, you may or may not be able to see what we were looking for. Remember, we were trying to find where is y1 equal to 77. So it's sort of somewhere in between 14 and 15. So it's not as exact, excuse me, as the first method, which I showed you with the intersecting lines. That is the best way to get your answer and the way that I would prefer you to use. So hopefully this helps out. As I said, I tried to find a good example on in YouTube or anywhere on the web, and they all really weren't that great. So let's hope this one works out for you.